The NBA season is over. So let's recap the Dallas Mavericks, the NBA championship runner-up. Michael Bolton.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. Unfortunately, my guest today, Ball Don't Stop, was unable to join us. He's too busy crying that the Nerds won. I'm also the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball, on TikTok at redrock_bball, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That is $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Visit fanduel.com/lockedon to learn more. Thank you also for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free. We are available on all platforms. First of all, congratulations to the Boston Celtics for winning the NBA championship. They were the best team all season. They are one of the best teams in modern history. And they summarily smashed every team that they played. I do not care a single bit about, well, everyone they played was injured. Whatever. That doesn't worry me. They had their own injuries. Big one, Porzingis, missed most of the season, or missed most of the playoffs. Just the positivity. I want to be more positive with all of this stuff. They were great. They were awesome. They took care of business when they needed to. It's fantastic to see guys that go through struggles like Tatum and Brown and all these sort of players who have on this team and lost so many times and struggled at certain points. You come through. Even though the Celtics have won a million championships, it's not like they've had, runs and runs and runs of titles recently. They haven't. They've won 2 since the 80s. It's great for them to do that. I've got a lot of thoughts on the NBA playoffs and finals in general. Some of them will come out here, but my number one thing remains. This is maybe my most controversial take. I don't know if it's most controversial. Maybe there's others that are more. That'll never happen. The playoffs are just too long. I know the NBA season is too long and too many, more importantly, too many games. Not too long, too many games. I don't like 7-game series. It should just be single elimination. It just should be. To me, and people will say, well, these finals, they're so boring. There's these blowouts and there's no vibe or whatever. It's because they go for 2.5 months. And the NBA championship was decided yesterday. The title given out on a random Monday night in June. Can you plan for that? Can you have a party for the finals? Can you plan anything around this sort of stuff? You just vaguely know when it's going to happen. This should be an event. The playoffs should be an event. And I don't want to hear about, well, what happens if you're the best team all season and then you lose because you have a bad game? Don't have the playoffs then. If you want to reward the best team, which Boston was, if you want to reward the best team, make the team with the best record win the title. Simple. If you lose in the playoffs, you lose. Bad luck. It would never happen. It literally will never happen. I understand this, losing money, all that sort of stuff. I just think that the way that this goes on for so long, the fact that we don't have set times when things happen, when we could be doing this on a Sunday night, a Saturday night, NBA final, bang, everyone around, let's watch this one game, winner take all, done. Instead, we have to hope to get to a Game 7 to have that scenario. And even then, you can't plan that date in advance, can you? It just frustrates me absolutely to no end. And in the end, I don't care that a team that has been the best all season, they don't end up winning the title. Because if that's the case, then you don't actually care about the competition in the playoffs. You just want the team that was best through the season to win. That's all you want. And whether there's variance through the number 1 seed didn't make in the West, didn't make the NBA Finals. We saw that. The number 2 seed didn't make it. The number 3 seed didn't make it. There are still upsets that happen. So does that invalidate their seasons? Don't know. Well, I do know. It will never happen, and I will go. And I know that most people will go, well, you got to have it this way. We love the series. We love the adjustments of coaches. I know people have this idea, but to me, it seems really clear that if you just have a very structured, these are when the playoffs are on, single elimination games, stakes are raised, it brings way more into it versus a 2.5 month situation with random Monday night championships being given out. But congrats to the Celtics. Fantastic all season. An absolute GM masterclass from Brad Stevens. A fantastic coaching effort from Joe Mazzulla. And all of their players, the big 6 guys, even the role players, performed exactly as they needed to. We'll talk more about the Celtics when we do their team review at some point coming up. But we are here now to talk about the Dallas Mavericks, a team that I don't think many people expected to make the finals. Of course, they were only a 5 seed. I placed 3 bets on teams for championships this season. The Thunder, the Wolves, and the Mavericks. Of course, I didn't win any money, but they're the 3 teams that I got because I got really good odds on them, and I was hoping that I could get there. And I was looking pretty good at one point that I had a decent shot of that happening, but no, didn't happen, did it? So I had, I guess, some level of belief that they'd be able to do it, but they didn't. Let's talk about the Mavericks. They're a little bit of a harder team to talk about because there was the mid-season trade. But they finished 50-32 with a plus 2.6 net rating. That's a pretty good team. It's not an absolute game-breaking net rating or anything along those lines. They had the 8th best offense. They had the 17th best defense. But that defense did improve significantly after the trades. Their preseason over-under was 45.5, and I was massively off. I picked them for 42 wins at the start of my over-under spot. When I made my regular season, like my adjustment just before the regular season started, I actually moved them way higher to 47, which actually hit the over, but didn't get to where they needed to be. So that was the biggest adjustment I made from the initial over-under run that I did, heading towards the secondary one that I did, but still didn't hit the right mark. At least we hit the over-under for the Dallas Mavericks. In the draft, they don't have their pick. The Knicks get their pick in the first round. They do have pick number 58, which is not their pick in the second round, but they have that pick, and you shouldn't be expecting anything good to happen with that selection. Let's talk about lineups. Their most common starting group is the one that they went with after the All-Star break, after the trade deadline, after those players that acquired sort of slid back into roles. Luka Dončić, Kyrie Irving, Derek Jones Jr., Paul Washington Jr., and Daniel Gafford. That was their most common starting group. It was also their best starting, or their best lineup that played over 100 possessions together. It was a plus 15.9. And that was Doncic, Irving, Jones, Washington, and Gafford. That's the best lineup that they had. And congratulations to them. Cool. Let's talk free agents. 2 restricted guys are guys that don't really matter. Greg Brown III, I bet you didn't know he was here, nor did you know that Brandon Williams was on this team, because I'll be honest, I didn't know Brandon Williams, or not I did know at one point, but I forgot because it was irrelevant, much like their restricted free agencies. Apologies to them and their families. This one does become interesting. Derek Jones Jr. is unrestricted. He was a late signing in the free agent process for the Mavs. He's on a minimum contract, so what they're able to pay him is going to be not huge. They can't give him a big amount of money. I don't imagine that teams are going to give him a huge amount of money. I expect that he returns. And I expect that he doesn't really matter for fantasy. They've got 3 players with non-guarantees on their contracts, and I'm almost certain that 2 of those non-guarantees will be picked up. One of them is Dante Exum, who had a really hot stretch early in the season, had an injury, struggled a little bit at times, but I think he can be a rotation player for them pretty regularly. The other one is Jaden Hardy, and I'll talk more about Hardy later on. Some definite interesting things happened with him in the playoffs, and the other one is AJ Lawson, who just has seemed to be on this team forever, and occasionally gets a game when they sit everyone down for a bulk rest type scenario, but overall, I don't think we need to get massively invested in the future of AJ Lawson. They've got 3 guys, though, that are going to be on expiring contracts. One of them is Kyrie Irving, who's got a player option, so next season could be his last under contract. There's Timmy Hardaway. Well, Kyrie's is a $43.9 million player option for the 24-25 season, so you would think that he opts out. Tim Hardaway Jr. is unrestricted, and Dwight Powell is also got a player option that could make him an unrestricted free agent. So that means that Timmy on this expiring deal, we'll talk more about Tim later, We will see. I thought that he'd be traded this season. That was all the word coming out that we heard the talk from Tim Hardaway saying, yeah, hey, what's your role going to be? What's Jason Kidd said? And he's like, Jason has told me absolutely nothing about my role. And the reports were that he was just going to get dealt, and he didn't. I would say there's a pretty decent chance that Tim Hardaway finds himself playing somewhere else this upcoming season, but also maybe not. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. That is the formula for winning championships. Did Boston have those things? Yeah, I would say they did. But it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. I'm not sure how Boston went about keeping their ride or die alive, but I know if they wanted to, they would have gone to eBay Motors because they have everything that you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights. So let's say, is Porzingis the supercharger? What's Derek White? The roof rack? Probably. What about an exhaust kit? Drew Holiday? I guess so. But they're all the things that you can get to help improve and get yourself to championship level, and you do that with your car as well. Speed, power, style. eBay Motors has it all. Over 122 million parts. If you're number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. When an eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time of your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it is easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to US customers because Canada sucks. All right, so let's get into talking about the players on this team. Let's start with the starters. And I didn't even really know how to fully designate who a starter was on this team. So there was probably like 9 guys that I could have thrown in there. But we'll start with the obvious one. Let's start with the big fella, Luka Doncic. Now, Luka has been a player in fantasy category leagues that has been overrated by some, underrated massively by others, and it finally all sort of came together for him this season. Luka's 25. He played 70 games. He played 37 minutes a night. He was the second-ranked player in -1 rankings. He was 4th on Yahoo and 1st in points. His ADP was 3. Now, I was very much not someone that wanted to draft Luka Doncic in the top 4 or 5 this season for one very simple reason, is that in the fantasy playoffs, he had a 2-game week, and there were other players I would have preferred to draft around that time period. And I would stand by that. I believe in that finals week, he was the 50th ranked player. He is always, to me, over the last 2 to 3 years, I ignore the overall 9-cat ranks. I laughed at people that would tell me they wanted Robert Williams instead of Luka Doncic in a 9-cat league because Robert Williams ranked higher. I laughed at that. The reason I was not in on taking Luka top 2, top 3 in a category league, points leagues, I just didn't want to take him 1 or 2 because of the 2-game week. Was the 2-game week. Also, the fact that he was injured basically from the beginning of the season. All through the World Cup, he was injured. He was limping around. I was very worried about how that load would go. Now, that didn't actually come to fruition. He played 70 games, but we also saw him get banged up all through the playoffs and was pretty injured towards the end of the season. And there is some worry about just the amount of basketball that he has been playing. I do worry somewhat about how that moves into next season. He averaged 34 points with over 4 threes, over 9 rebounds, and almost 10 assists on 1.4 steals. He shot 49 and 79 from the line. One of the big things of Luka had always been, not great free throws, and now he's at an average mark. These numbers are all massive for Luka. There was also some concern from me, maybe others, I don't remember, but from me about when Kyrie joined this team after the deadline the previous season, Luka's assist numbers dropped, and you can see they're not at 10 a game. Well, they're close enough, but they are a little bit lower than where they had been in the past. And I was like, okay, pair this with the 2-game week, the Kyrie maybe impact on his usage, maybe impact on his assists. I thought there'd be some sort of a concern, but it wasn't. I said his assists like they weren't 10, but that was up from 8 the year before. So he took a 1.8 per game assist jump, which I didn't see that coming. I didn't expect that to happen. His usage did take a hit from 37.6 down to 36. That's some of the Kyrie impact. But when Kyrie joined last season, we saw Luka's assists drop. So for them to switch the other way at almost a 25% increase was a surprise. He also hit 38% on threes and 57% on twos. And assuming we don't have another random 2-game week in the playoffs, I'll have no problem looking at him at pick probably not pick one because it's going to be either Jokic or Wemby for me, I would guess. But Jokic, Wemby, Shea, Luka, pretty comfortable, I think, in that top 4 group. Then you get on to Halliburton, then you get on to Giannis perhaps in that mix. But I think that top 4 is really, really secure. The best comps for him, really interesting, over on Crafted were year 6 of Tracy McGrady, that's in Orlando, and then Jason Tatum year 6, which was last season. Now, Luka, I think, is better than both of those players. But yeah, 99th percentile EPM, 99th percentile Crafted, and free throw rate, this is interesting, only 86th percentile. The idea is, or the thought, I guess, with Luka is he just gets so many free throws. He's always getting there. His free throw rate was down massively from 10.5 per game down to 8.7. And would have been great if he actually had stayed at 10, considering he improved from 74% shooter. His previous years, 71, 76, 73, 74, 74, took it to 79. Has his free throw shooting been fixed? I'm not sure I can go out on a limb completely and tell you that that's the case. He shot 77 in the playoffs, so maybe. So there is a little worry there, but I don't think that should dissuade anything. What I will dissuade you from is some of the absolute nonsense that I have seen. And I know, don't take things on Twitter seriously. Like, I get that, but I've seen things get amplified by the foolish algorithm ran by the foolish man who runs the foolish site, that just talking about Doncic in the most insane way possible, like showing highlights of him in the bubble, and go, man, what happened to this guy? How much has he dropped off? Yeah, he's dropped off so much, he's actually dropped off in a negative way to become way better. What are we watching? What on earth are people talking about? And then this will happen, like, there's this idea, I know, of rings culture, right? It's like, well, they lost in the finals, they're trash. Cool. That also means they were the second best team, theoretically, because they were the second last team remaining. But you didn't win, so you're trash. Luka, wow, what a drop-off. Yeah, just his best season ever. And top 2-3 player in the league, maybe the best player. Like, yeah, massive drop-off. Huge decline. But there are some people who have got cow shit for brains that might think that. I don't know that reflects in fantasy at all, but it is worth noting that we've known this for years. If you lose in the finals, it's apparently way worse than losing in the first round, or way worse than not making the playoffs. It's the ultimate sin you can have as a great player. So, I don't know if it does anything for his value next season, but remember that there are people that exist, maybe you are one of them watching this, that are lamenting the Luka drop-off and how bad he is, which is insane. I would think pretty clearly, but maybe not. Let's talk Kyrie. There was a lot heaped on Kyrie the previous season. Kyrie going to the Mavs is what cost them. He ruined their team. He pushed them out of the playoffs. I pushed back on that. I'm not the biggest Kyrie guy, but I pushed back on it. I said that's actual garbage. Kyrie did not make them bad. Kyrie did not cost them. Kyrie did what he needed to do. The lineups with Kyrie and Luka were fine. They were very, very good. The reason they struggled in that season was the chemistry, but also the fact that when Kyrie came, they gave away their defensive players to get Kyrie in. They couldn't replace them, so their team defense sucked. And that, you don't bring Kyrie and go, well, Kyrie's going to come in and fix our defense. So you can't blame him for that. And then they fixed those problems this offseason, and it was great. Kyrie played 58 games. He had that weird injury. Remember when he sort of laying on the ground and someone fell onto his leg and sort of smashed the back of his heel into the court or something weird like that, just a random injury. But overall, I would say that the ideas, that's the wrong phrase, the general consensus on Kyrie of like, oh, he's a team cancer, oh, he's going to do something stupid. Well, that didn't happen this season. That doesn't preclude that it could happen in the future, but I think also some of that stuff had been overblown in the past. But also, Kyrie seemed a little bit more contrite, more open to admitting that he was wrong or that he had learnt things and grown and all those sort of things. And the vibes on this team had seemed really, really good. And that's probably a good spot for me to talk, because people will love to come back and go, hey, didn't you tell us that Jason Kidd was the worst coach in the NBA? Yes, I did. Because when I told you that, I believed that that was true, and I would say that the evidence would have suggested that was true. It is also definitely not true now. Jason Kidd had a fantastic season, but more importantly, a fantastic season coach, a fantastic playoffs coaching, and he improved remarkably. You could not sit here and tell me that Jason Kidd was a good coach in Milwaukee or in Brooklyn or in the first few years in Dallas, because he was objectively bad. but he improved, and he is now good. So both of these things can be true. Jason Kidd could have been the worst coach in the NBA, and I firmly believe that he was. Or at least up there with mates like Dwayne Casey. But he changed, he learned, he improved, and he is not anymore. It's not some gotcha to say, hey, didn't you say Kidd was the worst? Yeah, I did. And he's not anymore. Like, these things do change, much like opinions on players and what they do to teams change as well, with like Kyrie. He was drafted at pick 14, which I thought was in about the right range. He ended up 18th in -1. Yahoo had him 27th. Yeah, it's because some missed games there. He averaged 26 with 3 threes, 5 rebounds, and 5.2 assists, 1.7 steals, shot elite 50 from the field, but 91 from the line. He shot 41 on threes, and we'll get to that in a second. Just really great stuff. His best player comps were year 10 of Steph Curry, which was the 2019 season, I think, and year 10 of Kemba Walker. He was 96th in EPM. He was 97th in CPM. But he shot unbelievably from 3, but only 41st percentile in three-point attempt rate. He's not taking, like, he hit 3 threes a game, but he's not taking buckets and buckets of threes. If Luka's hitting 4 threes a game, I think Kyrie should be hitting that amount as well, given that he is a much better shooter. So I'd like to see that part of his game change. That would impact his field goal percentage, but it would impact his scoring to go up too. Kyrie is now 32 though. So at some point, we are going to see a decline from him. Probably not yet. He's very much good enough to hold that off for 3 to 4 more years. There's always going to be these small declines. We know this. Age 29, and then it's how good you are as to how steep that decline is. So he's going to be a little bit worse. He should be a solid, I'd say, mid to back end second round pick for the next couple of years. And then we start to see more of a fall off for Kyrie Irving. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. For you guys in the States, it is summertime, and I'm going to be over there enjoying that summer too, because this morning it was here so cold. It was frozen. What's your freezing point in America? 32? Well, that's what it was here. There was ice on the ground. That never gets like that. So I was like, man, I cannot wait to get over for the summer in the States. But what the summer also means is it means that baseball's on. It means that WNBA is on. It means that golf, NASCAR, all of these things are happening. And at FanDuel, you can check them out, because new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 that you can use to bet everything from every baseball game, All-Star, Home Run Derby, WNBA, player props, futures, same game parlays. It's all there. So go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summer bucket list. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, and don't forget to gamble responsibly. Okay. So they're the two studs. Now, one of the more controversial players, I think, is going to be Daniel Gafford. You may have found other people in the fantasy space, I don't actually remember, who were big on Gafford this coming season. I would suggest that not many were bigger than I was. I drafted him more than any other player on my teams. I was very much of the opinion of, I'm not sure Gafford's that good, but he's the only center in Washington, so he's going to have to play. He is going to put up numbers, and he's got a fantasy-friendly game, so I am all in. All right, so I drafted him everywhere. His ADP was only 101. I think I had him predicted about 60th or 70th. He ended up 65th in -1 rankings. His Yahoo rank is 31st, which, of course, again, is insane. You're never touching Daniel Gafford in round 3. You're not doing it ever. Please don't fall for that. He was 79th in points leagues. The problem here is that Gafford got traded to Dallas, and I was of the opinion that Dereck Lively was the better player, definitely a better part of their future. And then we heard all of the talk from Jason Kidd. I thought, actually, let me phrase this. I thought that Dereck Lively was the better player, but I also was under the impression, giving away that first round pick, that the Mavs would start Gafford. Right, that's what I thought they would do. It would make sense that they would do that. But they didn't. And then Doncic came out and said, yeah, it was great to get a backup. And Kidd said, yeah, it was great. We got now backup center. That's fantastic. And then they played him like a backup center. He played 17 minutes a night for the first 3 weeks he was in Dallas. And I used that data, those minutes, my view on Gafford as a player, the comments from Luka and Jason Kidd, and said, all right, I'm actually going to drop him because this is probably who he is. On a good team, he is a backup. Everyone's telling me he's a backup. The whole team is telling us he's a backup. And then, of course, he went on the most unbelievable streak of all time. He didn't miss a shot for 3 weeks. He was a top 20 player for about 2 of those weeks. And he fell back off. And I looked absolutely ridiculous, A, for dropping him myself, but also telling you that I think he can be dropped. Very, very clear big mistake. The reasons are there, but a big mistake. Then we get to the playoffs, and the things that I thought would play out did. And I don't know where we go with this for Gafford next season. Well, I sort of do. He's almost definitely going to be overdrafted. He averaged 11 and 7.5 with 2.1 blocks. He shot 73 from the field and 67 from the line. This is screaming that archetype of player, the Walker Kessler. You do 2 things, 3 things well. Big blocks, big field goals, solid rebounds. You don't do anything else. And if you're in danger of losing minutes, which I do believe that he is, then if you're not getting an unfettered 26 minutes a night, 25 minutes a night, and what did Gafford play this year? 25 minutes a night in his 74 games. Then you run the risk of not being a draftable or startable player. Now, he started every game in the playoffs, but played 20 minutes a night. So already down 5. He averaged 9 and 5.5 with 1.5 blocks on 63% shooting. That is not a top 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 ranked player. It's not. And Dereck Lively is far superior in terms of a long-term prospect. And you could argue that Dereck Lively is already a better player than what Daniel Gafford is. Now, there are going to be situations where Lively gets hurt. He was hurt multiple times this season. And Gafford steps up, plays more minutes, and looks great. But Lively played 2 minutes a game extra in the playoffs, 22 minutes a night. And I would expect that they go in a full minute split, or Lively, in his development, steps ahead of Gafford. Gafford, to me, again, is solid enough, but I don't view him as an elite player. And therefore, those elite players, they lose relevance very quickly. Be very cautious about how you look at him. The best comps, he was strong this season. There's no debating this. But don't get carried away. Jarrett Allen, year 6, and Ivica Zubac, year 6 were the best comps for him. His advanced stuff, really good. 90th percentile EPM, 86th uncrafted. Part of the problem when you are a limited category player like Gafford, blocks are nice, field goals are nice, but he's a bad rebounder. 22nd percentile in defensive rebound ability. It's really bad. 5 rebounds in the playoffs. So in essence, he becomes a 2 category player. And when you're at risk of those minutes, that is one that I was massively in on Gafford this last season. There is, depending on where he comes out, rankings and ADP, like if he comes out 60s, 70s, absolutely forget it. I have no interest in that unless some wild stuff changes. But I cannot see how I would be interested in that. Will I be interested in Dereck Lively? Well, I'm not really sure. I really enjoy what Lively does. I loved the fact that the Mavs got him in the draft. There was some people, he was a real number 1 high school recruit. I know Raf Barlow from Locked On NBA Big Board talked about his ability to shoot and maybe that coming along at some point, and he had him ranked really quite highly. And the fit for Lively was great. Now, when I talked to Nick Angstadt from Locked On Mavs heading into the season, we're like, hey, where do you think Lively's role is? I'm not sure that this team that wants to go somewhere will want to trust a non-top 10 big man center to start. And I said, I agree. That just doesn't really happen. And then Lively came out, and this is where the thing is confusing. They started Lively and Prosper in the preseason and went, that's very interesting. One of them played 4 minutes total for the year. Not quite, but close enough. And the other one was Dereck Lively. So we had the 2 rookies, and we didn't really know what they'd do with it. One of them got the nod, the other one didn't. So we were all in, once we heard that news, on taking Lively in the last round of drafts. He had an ADP of 143, only drafted in 24%. But overall, it was from a fantasy point of view, okay. 143rd, -1, 163 on Yahoo. He averaged 9 and 7 with 1.4 blocks on 75% shooting. Now, the difference between him and Gafford is 2 extra points, half a rebound, and 0.7 blocks per game in 1 fewer minute. So Gafford, just at the moment, a better shot blocker, slightly higher scorer. The best comps for Dereck Lively, Andres Biedrins in year 3, and I wrote that wrong. That capitalization's killing me. And then rookie year, Onyeka Okongwu. 85th percentile EPM as a rookie on a team like this is a really impressive number for Lively. Crafted didn't love him as much, 63rd percentile, but here's where the difference lies between him and Gafford. He was only 67th percentile Dereck Lively in contesting shots at the rim. And that needs to go up to get that number to go up. I think Lively's actually going to turn into, by year 3, a very consistent top 70 fantasy player who does a little bit more offensively. Not going to be a big-time three-point shooter or anything like that, but at least be able to be a 12 to 13-point scorer, an 8-rebound guy, and a 2-block guy on high efficiency and playing 29 minutes a night by year 2 when he's 22, or year 3 when he's 22 years of age. Look, if I had to make a decision between Lively or Gafford to draft next season, when I look at trajectory of those players, again, at this early stage, I would say that Gafford's got more chance of dropping and Lively's got more chance of running away with more minutes. So I'd probably go that direction, even though at this point, Daniel Gafford is a better per-minute fantasy producer. As an on-court prospect and where they develop, I take Lively every day of the week. But if they are in this minute split, I'm not sure that 24 a night or 23 a night for Lively is going to be enough to make that a draftable situation. Like I said already, he played off the bench in all those playoff games, 22 minutes a night. He averaged 8 points and 7 rebounds with a block. He shot 67 from the field. Pretty good in your first playoffs. Pretty good. And I'm just going to have a look if I can see what his on-off stuff was. Yeah, like an absolutely insane plus 14 on-off net rating in the playoffs. That is, for a rookie center, absolutely massive. And I'm going to guess if he had such a massive plus-minus on-off in the playoffs, that means Gafford's was horrendous. And yeah, it was. Negative 13.8. So I think our eyes, the minutes, those stats would suggest to us that Lively was significantly better in the playoffs for Dallas. PJ Washington. Well, we know the story. We know who PJ is. I guess what I'll say this way is NBA fans who aren't fantasy players found out what we know through the playoffs. That Gennaro Gattuso, the spirit, even though he's not dead, his spirit lives on in PJ Washington because, as you know, sometimes maybe good, sometimes maybe shit. Shot the absolute lights out against the Thunder and then didn't, because that is who he is. That is who he's always been. That is who he was in Charlotte. These great moments where you go, PJ, let's fly. And then other moments where you go, what are we doing? What's going on here? PJ is only 25. He's the same age as Gafford. He played 73 games in 30 minutes. About half of those, or 60% of those starting and the other coming off the bench. 136 in -1, 112 on Yahoo. He averaged 13 and 5.6 rebounds with almost 2 threes. 0.8 blocks is pretty low. 44 as a power forward from the field is terrible. 68 is terrible from the line. 56 on his 2s and 32 on his 3s. His best comps were year 4 of Joe Barry Carroll, the big fella, and Harvey Grant year 3. 63rd percentile EPM, 56 on Crafted, and he had a shot quality to judge how good of a shooter he is, a 40th percentile. So we saw Washington when he joined Dallas come off the bench, and then he moved in the starting lineup, and he's solid. But is there actually any upside in him as a regular fantasy contributor for standard leagues? I say probably not. Now, I would guess that he goes into the season as the starter, playing 32 minutes a night, and that's fine. But there's going to be wild inconsistencies. He's not going to block shots or get rebounds or get assists or get steals. It's going to be, do you rely upon him getting hot and shooting and getting enough shot attempts to be relevant? And I would say that no, I don't trust any of that. So he fit really nicely. He still remains incredibly up and down. And that's where you do end up with a hard sort of player to judge in terms of what his overall relevance is. He played 36 minutes a night in the playoffs, but still shot under 35 from 3, under 43 from the field, blocked 0.8 shots. It's the same thing over and over again. And there's just no interest in that really from a fantasy point of view. The other guy I want to count in the starting group is Derrick Jones Jr. because he started the year as the starter. He lost that job during the season to Josh Green, and he regained it towards the end of the year. 27 years of age, he should be back, but maybe not in free agency. 76 games, 23 minutes a night. Yahoo had him 172nd. That's not really accurate. 257th in -1. He averaged 9 points with 1 3, 3 rebounds, an assist and 0.7 blocks. He shot 34 on his 3s and 61 on his 2s. There's just not a lot here. And I'll be honest with you, usually I have a decent idea at least of the names of players or their production when I'm looking at the statistical comps. But his number one statistical comp was a bloke I have literally never heard of. Ansu Sasay in year 3. Now, you might tell me, yeah, hey, I'm a big Ansu guy. In fact, if you're a big Ansu guy, drop it in the comments. I have no idea who that is. Jake Layman, year 5, was the second best comp. He's 69th percentile EPM, 61st in CPM. As you know, he's never going to touch it. Offensive load, 17th percentile. And we just ignore that. For nearly every fantasy league, there's no upside in Derrick Jones. His minutes will go up and down. Occasionally, he'll block some shots. Occasionally, the shot will go in. Sometimes it won't. He'll never touch it. Bang. We don't care. And I know that sounds harsh, but it just doesn't move us really from a fantasy point of view. Let's talk about some other guys that we do need to cover off on this team because there are some other at least interesting players. And we will start with Tim Hardaway Jr., who, again, I didn't know that he'd be on this team. I didn't know what his role would be. And he started out, I think he was like, him and Cole Anthony were the 2 favorites for 6th man of the year at the start of the year, which to me indicates that if you're doing betting stuff on 6th man of the year, the market at the start of the season is going to have some wild values. Because if those 2 were the favorites, they were useless by the end of the year. Maybe that's not an every year thing, but that definitely happened this year. Hardaway, I found this hard to believe. He's 32 already. He played 79 games and somehow averaged 27 minutes. He ranked 217th in -1. Yahoo will tell you he was 142nd, meaning he was a standard league guy. Of course, he wasn't. He averaged 14 points with 2.7 threes, 3 rebounds, 1.8 assists, half a steal, shot 40 from the field, 85 from the line, 35 on threes. Like, cool. 48 on 2s. His best comps were year 2 of Marco Bellinelli, year 12 of Marco Bellinelli, and year 9 of Wally Zerbiak. He was 46th percentile on EPM and 30th in crafted. Defensively, the horrible steal numbers. Deflections, he was in the 7th percentile. Tim Hardaway has the occasional good game. We've seen that. We saw it. He had that, 15 points in the 4th quarter of Game 4 of the finals. But realistically, his defense now at this point in his career is so bad that it's just very hard to play him. He only played 14 of their 22 playoff games. He averaged 13 minutes. He shot 38 from the field. He averaged 4 points despite that big game. I would expect that they look to move on, but then I would also expect that they don't really count Tim Hardaway as any sort of part of their rotation future moving forward. And I don't really care where he ends up. There's not going to be a team that goes, right, let's prioritize Tim. He's going to play 32 a night. He's going to get 28 usage and be good for fantasy. Not interested. Now, there might be a spot that opens up weirdly because of multiple injuries, and then he recovers a level of high usage with good shooting. But that's a long bow to draw considering where he currently is. And I wouldn't be surprised if Timmy Hardaway is out of the rotation on quite a few nights for the Mavericks next season. This was the opportunity for Josh Green to really step up this season. There was a role there. I wouldn't say that he grabbed it. He did have some injuries. He had some opportunities to start. It was his best year in terms of minutes, 26 minutes a game. He's 23 though, and we sort of saw who he is. 243rd on -1, 231st on Yahoo, averaging 8, 3, and 2, 0.8 steals. And as a guy where your offense is going to be really low, you're not going to have much usage or much creation. You got to get steals and you got to hit threes. And he did hit threes. 39%, but not enough volume. He hit 2s, 57% as well, but there's just not enough happening. 8, 3, and 2 with 0.8 steals does not get anybody interested, and when you're close to 30 minutes a night, that's so far off. Sterling Brown, year 2 was his best comp. I think Sterling Brown played one season in Dallas. Maybe I'm wrong on that. No, it was in Houston, wasn't it? After coming from Milwaukee. And rookie year, Karis LeVert, which is interesting because LeVert, I would say, is known more for being a little bit of a playmaker. Bad at the line as well for Joshy Green, 68% there. 32nd percentile EPM, 45th in crafted, and as a shooter, 42nd percentile. Shot quality is not going to cut it. A solid enough role player, but I think we're 4 years in now to the Josh Green experience in terms of him in the NBA. He's had a couple of opportunities to cement himself as a starter, and I'm not sure it's going to work out. As a role player, as a bench guy, sure, this was a chance to ramp stuff up, and we didn't. The chance was given. It is hard, yes, playing alongside Kyrie, playing alongside Luka, but even like someone like PJ Washington, it's hard to play alongside him, but he was able to at least get some stuff done. And Green really wasn't. So I don't really think we care a huge amount there about him in fantasy. Where I think things get a little bit interesting is Jaden Hardy. Hardy is a player, obviously, that slid amazingly in the draft. Considered maybe a top 5 player before he went to the G League Ignite. Fell all the way to the second round because you'll be shocked to hear this if you followed any of my draft coverage. He shot poorly from 3 in the G League. Yeah? This season, he got it up to 36% because another feather in the cap of G League Ignite players improving their shooting significantly once they hit the NBA. Hardy's not yet 22. He played 14 minutes a night. He played 73 games. His rankings are not good, 398th. He averaged 7 points in those 14 minutes. Let's double that. Take that to 28 minutes. That's 15 points. He hit 1 3 a game. Let's make it over 2. 2 rebounds and 1.5 assists. So 4 rebounds, 3 assists. Yeah, it's not great. No defensive stats to speak of. He shot 41 from the field, which includes a putrid 45% on twos. But he did get that up, like I said, up to 36% on his three-pointers. The reason I do want to highlight a little bit of Jaden Hardy here is that there are some very easy areas to improve. He was in the 4th percentile. 4th. 96% of players were better than him at finishing at the rim. That's horrible. Now, if that takes a leap up and he goes to 60% at the rim instead of 50, well, now you're talking about a guy who's going to be a really prolific scorer. And with Tim Hardaway maybe getting traded, maybe aging out of actually being an NBA role player, with the way that the Mavs used Jaden Hardy in the playoffs, after really, realistically not using him much in the regular season at all, makes me think that there's a little bit more happening there. Now, he didn't play huge amounts in the playoffs. Don't get me crazy on this. But he played 7 minutes a night. He shot 41% on threes. His two-pointers, still a little struggle. He averaged 4 points with an assist. Not great numbers. But he was there, and they went to him more and more as the series went on. His best comps were year 2 of Rex Chapman and year 3 of Joe Johnson in Phoenix. Look, his advanced numbers. 20th in percentile EPM is bad. 14th on crafted is bad. But his box creation is 75th percentile. And this team needs somebody else to be able to handle the ball and create something when Kyrie and Luka are out or sitting or whatever. And I think year 3 Jaden Hardy will push into that. Now, that doesn't mean that he's a draftable player for majority of fantasy leagues. But he'd be one of those guys that I think is going to have a relatively sizable leap forward next season. There just seems to be a little bit of writing on the wall there. I'm not sure that we get anything like that from Olivier Maxence Prosper, who did start that first preseason game and then basically just disappeared. He was someone that there was a little bit of love for him coming out of the draft. I was not as high on him, and his fantasy translation coming out of Marquette was actually horrible. For a guy that was a defender, he generated no defensive events, and that really carried across. I wanted to highlight him because he was a first-round pick, but these numbers are bad. 3 and 2 in 8 minutes. Let's quadruple that. Let's get that up to 32 minutes. So that's 12 and 8. That's not too bad. 0.6 assists is 2.4, but 0.2 steals, 0.1 blocks is a 6'9 wing, defensive wing. You got to do better. 46% on twos, 29 on threes. Now, there is a huge case to say that he could be 55 on twos and 33 on threes next season. That happens to second-year players a lot. But he's got a long way to go. He shot just 68 from the line as well, so I'm not sure he ever develops a reliable shot. And I can't say that anything I've seen of him, NBA, preseason, regular season, summer league, I have not been impressed so far. Best comps for him were year 1 of Tom Hammonds and year 1 of Kenny Thomas. Yeah. EPM 7th percentile, CPM 14th percentile, and again, for a guy that should be doing stuff defensively, 2nd percentile in deflections. 2nd, that's really bad. You got to be more active. He didn't play a lot. I know this. I would hope he's able to play more moving forward. And there still is a gap in the rotation. Is Josh Green taking it? Is Derek Jones back? There's an opportunity there for somebody to play at the 3. He's probably more of a 4 than a 3, but he can play the 3 if everything works out as we hope. But I'm not convinced. If we look at his G League numbers, Prosper, he played 25 games and 33 minutes a night. He shot 50% from the field, including 42% on threes. That is very interesting. 76 from the line. But still, 0.6 blocks and 0.9 steals and 18 points. Need to do a little bit more than that. And he is already 22. So, won't say that I'm super high on Prosper and his dynasty outlook. But that is the end of me talking about the Dallas Mavericks. Congrats to them on a fantastic second half of the season, a fantastic playoffs, and making the NBA Finals. Everybody who's a Mavs fan should be proud of that. And that's huge to be able to do that. Repeating it next season, that's always going to be tough. The Western Conference is tough. How do you back that up? What moves do you make to improve? Is it a lot of cohesion? Does Lively take a step forward? Does Luka get better? Not sure. But it was impressive. And if you want to impress me, go and hit the thumb, leave a comment down below. And guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.